New Mexico's next governor. The debate. Brought to you as a public service by Jones Intercable, partners with the community. And by News Radio 770 KOB. Sponsored in part by Bob Turner's Ford Country, because your decision matters. Your host for this evening's live debate, Larry Aarons.
Thank you and welcome to tonight's debate. And we welcome you to the Sheraton Uptown Hotel in Albuquerque. We welcome our viewers across New Mexico and across the country viewing us tonight on C-SPAN, live from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Again, my name is Larry Aarons. I'm the morning show host on News Radio 770 KOB here in Albuquerque. Tonight we have what we think will be a lively debate with two candidates who are perhaps the political future of New Mexico, and of course one of these gentlemen will serve the next term as governor of the state of New Mexico. And they are ready tonight to answer questions from panelists. We also have questions featured tonight from our audience members here at the Sheraton Uptown Hotel, as well as questions that will be posed to each other. And we think that will be a lively part of our debate tonight. And we will start by introducing our candidates tonight and their running mates. And we'll start by protocol with the incumbent governor. Please welcome the current governor of the state of New Mexico. He is Governor Gary Johnson, the Republican candidate for governor. Also with us tonight is the incumbent lieutenant governor here at the state of New Mexico from Clovis, New Mexico. Please welcome Lieutenant Governor Walter Bradley. The Democratic candidate for governor is also the former mayor of the city of Albuquerque and a former state senator from Bernalillo County. Please welcome the Democratic candidate, Martin Chavez. And with Mr. Chavez tonight as his running mate, please welcome Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Diane Denish. Now, we have some panelists with us tonight representing a broad section of New Mexico interests and views, and we're going to introduce those folks to you now. And then we'll present the opening statements by our candidates and then move right into questions from our panelists. But with us tonight, a distinguished group of panelists. We have four of them with us tonight. First, let me introduce representing the Association of Commerce and Industry of New Mexico, ACI. They have selected Mr. David Buchholz as the chairman of its board of directors for the 1998-99 term. Mr. Buchholz, an attorney with the law firm of Sutton, Thayer & Brown, served as chief executive officer of that firm from August 1994 to December of 97. His practice includes securities law, government finance law, financial institutions law, and corporate and technology law matters. Please welcome one of our panelists, Mr. David Buchholz. Our next panelist is from an organization known as New Mexico First. She is president of New Mexico First, a statewide nonpartisan public organization that was founded in 1988 by Senators Pete Domenici and Jeff Bingaman. Since its inception, the New Mexico First organization has conducted 21 town hall meetings and published consensus reports on issues including health care, tax policy, education, and economic development, and works to implement the town hall recommendations at both the state and local government levels. Please welcome the president of New Mexico First, Arlene Roth. Our next panelist, representing the journalists. He has been a reporter for the past 19 years, reporter for the Associated Press in Kansas, Missouri, Washington, D.C., and here in New Mexico, covering state government and politics in Santa Fe for the past 5 years. Please welcome Barry Massey. And our final panelist is with us tonight, appointed by Governor Bruce King in 1991 and served a full 6-year term on the New Mexico Commission on Higher Education. Also elected and served as an Albuquerque City Councilor from 1974 to 1981, was state president from 1969 to 71, and national secretary from 71 to 74 of the League of Women Voters. Please welcome Sandy Eastham. Tonight's debate, ladies and gentlemen, brought to you by Jones Intercable, News Radio 770 KOB, and the Sheraton Uptown Hotel. And what we're going to do is go right into the opening statements, and then we'll have questions from the panelists. Then what we'll do is take about a 10-minute intermission. And during that 10-minute intermission, we'll have some pre-recorded messages from both candidates running for lieutenant governor. And then when we come back, we'll have questions from our audience, and then questions from the candidates to one another. We've done drawings backstage, and we're ready to begin. And the first opening remarks will go to Governor Gary Johnson.
Well, promises made, promises kept is more than just a campaign slogan. It's actually what's happened over the last 4 years. I've made educational funding a top priority. Today, over $300 million in additional dollars are yearly spent on education. That's K through 12. Over 5,000 college students are receiving free tuition because of the lottery scholarships, and a 9% raise in teachers' salaries was authorized. There haven't been any new taxes. I allowed no new taxes and eliminated $106 million in existing taxes, like the 6-cent a gallon gas tax and the tax on prescription drugs. I've been fighting crime by authorizing 2 new juvenile facilities, 2 new prisons, and 170 new state police officers. I've stopped runaway government spending in the state of New Mexico. With my veto pen, I've put the brakes on government spending, cutting budget growth in half and cutting my own government expense account by 62.5%. I believe I've made government accountable in New Mexico. I brought efficiency to state government, saving New Mexicans over $130 million a year by turning around the nearly 2.5% government employment growth and actually lowering the number of state government employees by 1,300. Our environment is being protected. We are protecting our water with a new geographical water information system and strict enforcement of existing laws. We're improving our economy with over 500 miles of 4-lane highway improvements, tax cuts, and streamlined regulations. I believe we are making New Mexico more business-friendly and creating more and better jobs. I've been right in the middle of reforming public assistance programs in New Mexico. Medicaid was saved through managed care. Welfare reform now requires those who can work to work. Working with legislators, I've authorized over 2,900 capital appropriations in the state of New Mexico, with $638 million going to those improvements.
Thank you, Governor Johnson. Next, the opening remarks from Democratic candidate Martin Chavez.
Well, it's great to be here this evening, and I'm really particularly pleased that my wife Margaret's here. Hi, hon. Thank you for all your love and support. I'm running for governor because I want to be the education governor for New Mexico. As the rest of the Southwest and the country is enjoying unprecedented support and growth, prosperity, New Mexico lags last. By every indicator, we have lost ground in the last 4 years. In just the last year alone, we've gone from the 8th highest unemployment rate in the nation to the highest. As of this year, we are now the poorest state in the United States of America. And we now have to endure national recognition, indeed national humiliation, being ranked the worst state in the union in which to raise a child. That's something that my opponent in previous debates has called a fun fact. But when he took office, we were ranked 36th. As mayor, I reinstated athletics into the middle schools, worked to close high school campuses, renegotiated joint powers agreements for better utilization of the public schools by all that hadn't been touched since 1964. We initiated the elementary school initiative so that no child has to go home in Albuquerque's public schools to an empty home in the critical latchkey hours unless the parents choose so. As your governor, our reduced class size will have full-day kindergarten. Meaningful, real accountability will increase standards for teachers, administrators, students themselves. I'm pleased to have been endorsed by every major teachers organization in the state of New Mexico. I want to thank Jones and KOB for sponsoring this event. My opponent has spent millions and millions of dollars in advertisements to try to convince you he should be reelected. I don't have that kind of money, but I think if you listen this evening, you'll agree with me that we don't have to go into the next century last in all the good things. Education will be the passion of my administration.
There we have our opening statements from our candidates, and now we'll move to the panelists' questioning of the candidates. And the way this will work, we'll go to each panelist, and each panelist will have one question. Both candidates will answer that question. And we'll start with David Buchholz from ACI.
Good evening, gentlemen. The Association of Commerce and Industry is a statewide organization. Over the last 15 years, we have witnessed sustained business growth along the Rio Grande corridor. However, the traditional economies of the rural areas of our state, particularly natural resource extraction, farming, and ranching, may well continue to struggle as we enter the 21st century. Newer economies, including those dependent on high technology forms of communication and delivery, may seek out non-urban areas if prospects are attractive to them. In that regard, what will your administration be doing to make our rural areas attractive to high-tech businesses? In the alternative, if high-tech industry chooses not to locate in our rural areas, what will your administration be doing to ensure the economic health of our rural communities?
And the first response to Martin Chavez.
Thank you very much for the question. First off, New Mexico lags behind in the hardwiring of New Mexico for the new technologies. We need to have every community of any size wired with fiber optics. We will have done that within 8 years of a Chavez administration. It's just got to be done. For many parts of rural New Mexico, particularly in the north, we may have to simply forget about the industrial age. The shoe factories that folks try to attract aren't even coming to this country any longer. Indeed, they're going to Korea, to Mexico, to the Philippines. What I propose is we step into the new technology and skip that industrial age. I would certainly never, ever veto monies for economic development for rural New Mexico, as has my opponent. That's just not the right direction in which to go. But we know that no matter what incentives you offer, new industry or industry that you want to grow that is homegrown, you've got to have qualified workforce. And I think workforce development is probably going to be the critical issue for rural New Mexico, indeed urban New Mexico as well in the future. My opponent vetoed the commission that would have overseen workforce development in New Mexico. I would have signed it, and I would have made it happen. We simply have got to do that. We can do so much better than we're doing now. The challenge is not to create jobs in the city of Albuquerque, but the challenge is to incorporate rural New Mexico, which has been left out for decades.
Same question to Gary Johnson.
What you're going to hear time and time again this evening is my opponent who would have signed everything that I vetoed. And I would just hold this up, and it won't be the last time that you will see this. It's a checkbook. And there's only so much revenue coming in, and you've got to balance that with the priorities that present themselves. So again, think of this unbalanced checkbook for all of those items that my opponent would have signed that I vetoed. Talking about rural New Mexico, we submitted a bill this last legislative session that would have allowed a rural jobs tax credit for jobs outside of the Rio Grande corridor. I feel as though this would have stimulated job growth in rural New Mexico. It did not get out of the legislature. Long term, I think that what's right for rural New Mexico is right for all of New Mexico. And long term, we need to be looking at cutting taxes in the state of New Mexico. When I took office, we were the second highest tax state in the United States as a percentage of income. Today, we're the 8th highest tax state as a percentage of income. Long term, we need to be looking to cut income tax in the state of New Mexico, benefiting all New Mexicans, doing more for job creation in rural New Mexico, I believe, than any other single item. I have a proposal to cut the income tax top rate from 8.2% down to 6.7%. Long term, I think we should be targeting a 3.5% income tax rate. Taxes are the answer. long-term policy to reduce income taxes in the state of New Mexico.
Our next panelist to question the candidates tonight is from New Mexico first, and Arlene Roth.
Thank you. Last year, the citizens of New Mexico met on the critical issue of managing New Mexico's land and water resources now and through the year 2020. One of the strongest recommendations from that town hall was the need for adequate data about New Mexico's water supply. The executive state agency responsible for producing the data is the State Engineer's Office, which is woefully underfunded and understaffed. In addition, there is a strong resistance to water metering statewide, which would assist in assessing the water supply. In what way would you address this vital issue of quantifying New Mexico's water supply over the next 4 years?
Gary Johnson.
Well, I'd like to point out that when I took office, the worst agency within all of state government is the State Water Engineer's Office. In 4 years, I think we've made a lot of improvement in the State Water Engineer's Office. It is still the worst department in state government, but this goes back decades. And the basic problem is there's about 4 times as much water being laid claim to as we think there is water. So a study to determine how much water we have is really critical to all this. There have been estimates that that study would cost as much as $120 million, which obviously we would need federal help for to be able to accomplish that. Again, long-term, water, natural resources are the big equation. We're moving in the right direction. Over the last 4 years, the State Water Engineer's Office has received a greater degree of funding increase, I believe, than any other state agency. Again, it's moving in the right direction, but it started out in a dead last position, and I would still place it in a dead last position. This has been ignored far too long.
Question now to Martin Chavez.
Thank you. You know, Governor, I don't have a fancy checkbook to wave around, and it certainly doesn't have millions of dollars that yours has in it. But I know that it's cheaper to educate a child than to imprison an adult. It's cheaper to inoculate a child than to hospitalize a child. These things have to be done, and we've got to stop waving these multi-million-dollar checkbooks around. So what are we going to do in regard to water? First off, nothing has been done to change the State Engineer's Office in the last 4 years. I will fire the State Engineer January 1. He'll challenge the Governor to do so. He has refused. He thinks he's doing a good job. It has not been computerized. The only agency in the state that is not computerized, indeed the most important agency. Not one single lawyer has been hired that has expertise in water law. Thousands and thousands of permits remain pending, just backlog, some uncontested. Nothing's been done. And this issue is going to tear New Mexico apart, rural against urban, if we don't get ready for it. So what will we do? First off, at the state level, we'll have a new planning component. That must happen. We have no planning in Santa Fe today. We'll have a depoliticized state engineer that is the product of bipartisan agreement. I think, frankly, that we may have to do away with the office and completely restructure and look at a commission format so that the inherent statutory conflicts in the state engineer's office are resolved. I will commence immediately upon taking office an inventory, surface, subsurface water. It's foolhardy for us to continue when we don't know how much water that we have in New Mexico. Urban is being pitted against rural. Counties are being pitted one against the other. This is simply wrong. And this is one instance where you can slash government, but you cut your nose off to spite your face in the process. I really worry for my state if we don't get ready for water going into the next century. I'll do that.
Our next panelist is Barry Massey from Associated Press.
Mr. Chavez, I think this question is first to you. A recent poll published by the Santa Fe New Mexican found that most people in the state wanted a tougher approach to juvenile crime. Currently, juveniles as young as 15 will automatically be tried as adults if they're charged with first-degree murder. Why shouldn't the state change the law so juveniles accused of murder be tried as adults, no matter how old they are?
Actually, that law that lowered the age to 15 was one that I sponsored in the New Mexico State Senate. I do think there is a point at which that we ought not to, in my heart, I couldn't in good conscience put a 7-year-old in the electric chair. And I very strongly support the death penalty under the appropriate circumstances. But we've got to have consequences for conduct, and this is one of the biggest failures of the criminal justice system in New Mexico. We need to take Springer and turn it into a boot camp, particularly for those first-time offenders, so that they understand you can't do wrong without consequence. That's one of the ways we cleaned up graffiti in the city of Albuquerque. That's one of the ways we cut juvenile crime. We need to have curfew enforcement statewide, and I will amend the state act so that every municipality, every county can have curfew so that they can keep their youngsters at home at night. There's nowhere else that a youngster should be after 11 o'clock at night but at home. There's so much we can do. When you look at the juveniles that commit the most heinous crimes and look at their history, you will see 6, 7, 8 interactions with the law with no consequence. We've got to change that. We've got to change that. But we also know that when it comes to all kinds of crime, you've got to prevent it at the very beginning. And that's where the smaller class size, the full-day kindergarten, early childhood development has got to be re-emphasized in New Mexico. It costs us so much to incarcerate these adults. It costs us so much less to educate children so that they behave responsibly.
Gary Johnson.
Well, I hope the citizens of New Mexico take pride in what I'm about to say, because I do. The Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. grades every governor every 2 years, A, B, C, D, F. On top of that, the Cato Institute ranks all the governors in the United States on fiscal policy management, 1 through 50. Johnson in New Mexico ranked number 5. So when you talk about... When you talk about dollars, I think it's also important to point out that I'm not a politician. I never have been, and I'm not going to be. I have brought a common sense business attitude to state government, and that it's important to understand that this isn't about politics. This is about common sense business attitude. I started a business in 1974 as a one-person operation. I grew that to over 1,000 people in 1994, and that was starting out with me. So based on what's in my checkbook, I understand what it takes to earn a dollar and what it takes to keep a dollar. And then talking about juvenile crime, I believe that when I took office, there was one component that was really missing when I took office, and that was secure facilities in the state of New Mexico, lock-up facilities for really hardcore kids. We've done that. We're in the process of building 2 new facilities. Up until now, we've had kids that have committed murder in dorm-like settings. And I very much support the ability to treat a child as an adult. Just the ability to be able to try a child as an adult. I think that's essential, not only in New Mexico, but any state. And long-term, again, consequences when it comes to kids, consequences for actions. I think that kids understand that concept. I think adults understand that concept.
Our next panelist is former Albuquerque City Councilor Sandy Eastham.
For at least the past 10 years, 16 to 17% of the state's budget has been appropriated to higher education. With 25 existing campuses of higher learning, these funds are diluted and are insufficient to adequately take care of our existing institutions. How can we consolidate our schools to use these funds more efficiently and effectively to improve the quality of education?
Going back, or when I first took office, and something that I've known in the state of New Mexico, we have 23 institutions of higher learning in the state of New Mexico. University of New Mexico has a branch college in Las Cruces. New Mexico State University in Las Cruces has branch colleges in Albuquerque, on and on and on and on. So one thing that I have held to since I've been governor is let's stop the expansion of schools, because I think that long-term we're going to have an inability to fund that expansion. So I think that that's been very important. I think that we have one of the lowest tuitions in the country, and that it's important for kids to understand that out of the dollar spent on their education, that about 23 cents of that comes out of their pocket. Now that's if a student is not on scholarship at all. The rest of it is picked up by the state of New Mexico. So I think long term we need to be looking at some reasonable tuition increases, letting kids spend a little bit more than 23 cents. Maybe they spend 24 cents, 26 cents on their education. Again, higher education in the state of New Mexico, as it is everywhere, is extremely important. And the lottery scholarships that we have in the state of New Mexico presently pay for over 5,000 high school graduating seniors in New Mexico to attend in-state schools. Long term, this is going to make a very big difference. Limiting growth long term make a very big difference. Funds in the future, again, kids make up a little bit more of what is being paid for their education.
Martin Chavez.
Well, we are, after the last 4 years of the current administration, now the poorest state in the United States of America. We don't need, in that context, to make higher education less affordable. We need to make it more affordable. And I think that's really the challenge. In the previous answer, I did not hear one single thing that's been done to address the problem. So let me tell you what we're going to do, Sandy. First off, we're going to empower the Commission on Higher Education, which has general oversight, to get tough in regard to accountability in the spending of public monies for higher education. I understand why Highlands University would want to put a branch in Rio Rancho. It makes economic sense for them. That's the competitive market if you accept that aspect of a competitive market. But it makes no sense as taxpayers to spend all that money to build a university that's 15 minutes away from the University of New Mexico. The Commission on Higher Education, the CHE, has got to be able to impose discipline. We don't have enough money to spend on higher education, so we've got to be very, very careful with the way that we spend it. But I think in that process as well, we have to be very careful that we appoint people of the highest caliber to the boards of regents around the state of New Mexico. I'm not looking for yes men and yes women on the boards of regents. I want those regents to be advocates for their institutions day in, day out. We do that. You empower the CHE, high-quality board of regents, emphasis on research and development, real accountability, and then you start to bring some rhyme and reason, some order to higher education spending in New Mexico.
Next, we'll allow our guest panelists to ask questions directly of specific candidates with follow-up questions. And we'll start with a follow-up question from David Buchholz from ACI.
My follow-up question is for former Mayor Chavez. In his response to my opening question, the governor indicated certain of his tax initiatives. In the past several years, the appropriateness and long-term viability of New Mexico's tax structure has been considered by many experts. Many of these experts cite tax policy as a significant factor in promoting the economic health of local economies. What is your view of New Mexico's current tax structure, and what suggestions can you make for its improvement as a tool for strengthening our economy?
Actually, every study, including the studies done at the request of the governor, indicate that workforce development is the #1 impediment to job growth in the state of New Mexico. And that's one of the things we've addressed, and I hope we'll have more time to talk about this evening. New Mexico has the second lowest property tax in the United States of America. I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing, and I think we should retain that. Our personal income tax is somewhere around the middle. I applaud the legislature's move this last session of the legislature to reduce the upper bracket from 8.8 to 8.5%. We certainly want people of wealth to be in New Mexico. We want lots of wealthy people in the state of New Mexico. That's how one of the ways that we create jobs. What I would like to do is take a complete look at the overall tax system. Specifically, how do we treat manufacturing equipment when we want to attract that industry or grow that industry? How can we, by incentive or disincentive, promote those things that we want? That's one of the deficiencies I think we have in our tax system today. But this business of $300 million tax cuts, which would be disastrous for education in New Mexico, I think, are the wrong thing at this time in our history.
Next follow-up question from Arlene Roth, President of New Mexico First.
Thank you. My question is for Governor Johnson. The most recent town hall brought together individuals from 22 of the American Indian tribes in New Mexico with their neighbors to participate in bridge building for better communication and relations. The tribes have a very unique relationship with the state, and as we have seen recently, one that is clearly misunderstood by the majority of the population. One innovative suggestion was to create an in-state sister cities program between the tribes and their neighboring communities in order to foster better understanding and mutual respect. What would you do to support two-way education and respect through the governor's office? What format would it take, and who would be responsible for carrying it out?
Well, I think that clearly, since I've taken office, we have 23 tribes and pueblos in the state of New Mexico. 23 sovereign governments in the state of New Mexico, and that clearly the Johnson administration has recognized all 23. And there has been open access to the governor's office in dealing specifically with all 23 tribes and pueblos. And that extends, and when I speak of the governor's office, I'm talking about the entire cabinet. I'm talking about Labor Department, I'm talking about Health and Human Services, I'm talking about Children, Youth, and Families. I am talking about joint partnerships with the tribes and pueblos, individually speaking, and there's been a lot of hard work, individually speaking, that truly has elevated tribes and pueblos in the state of New Mexico to the point now that they are participating in a degree that they never have before. And again, that's the record that's speaking.
Our next follow-up is from Barry Massey from Associated Press.
Mr. Chavez, this question's for you. You have proposed tens of millions of dollars for new programs, spending that money on full-day kindergarten, smaller classroom sizes, potentially expanding the eligibility for children and Medicaid. At the same time, you propose to cut the tax on food by about $100 million and make sure local governments aren't hurt in the process. How can you pay for these things without raising taxes?
Let's start with health care. First off, the money's already there. The federal government has appropriated the money last year. The state legislature has increased the level above poverty for which children need to qualify. The money is there. It's already funded. Unfortunately, this administration has not gone out. We have over 100,000 children without health care coverage in the state of New Mexico. That's a problem they haven't solved. We'll fix that problem. Let's look at full-day kindergarten. Very simply, $40 million a year. That's how much it will cost us if we want to have full-day kindergarten for our children in New Mexico. The money exists currently in surplus. It is right there. And should we have problems there, which we don't, then let's just go collect some of the $430 million the current administration has not collected. That fund... That fund, by their own tax and rev estimates, by their own figures, has grown 75% in the last 4 years. Of course, they laid off the tax collector so the taxes don't get paid, and that's an unfair tax on all the rest of New Mexico. I don't think that you ought to have to pay taxes because you're hungry, and this is an area where the governor and I are in agreement. We both agree that the tax ought to be repealed on food. Now, I would propose to do it over 4 years to phase it in, and I don't want to penalize local government to do that. And if I can't do it without penalizing, then I will not do it.
Our next panelist with a follow-up is former Albuquerque City Councilor Sandy Eastham.
This question is for Governor Johnson. There has been a great deal of discussion about establishing an extended learning network in New Mexico.
I'm sorry. Extended what?
Learning network in New Mexico, using technology to link our universities, colleges, and public schools so they can share instruction. While other states are moving ahead rather quickly in this area, New Mexico has made little progress. Should this be a priority, and if yes, what action will you take to expand the use of technology for distance education?
Actually, I'm going to disagree with you, Sandy, that in fact, distance education, fiber optics, that the state of New Mexico, and this is also disagreement with my opponent, that we have really done a good job of fiber optics in the state of New Mexico. We have rural gaps, and we have a gap in Farmington, which is in northwest New Mexico. We'll fill that gap through the 4-laning of 44. That's our plan there. And using state resources, communications resources, to tie into higher education statewide, that has also been ongoing. So I would suggest that we have laid the backbone for this kind of communication, and that it's been laid, and that if institutions aren't taking advantage of it, they should. And I recognize that in many cases, a lot of institutions are claiming that they need more funds for the actual wiring of their individual institutions. And of course, this upcoming legislative session, I'm in hope that a lot of the capital appropriation that will be available might get spent in that area. But I think it's important to understand that the state of New Mexico is hardwired, that we really do have a good backbone when it comes to telecommunications in the state of New Mexico.
Okay, we're just getting started, and we're going to take a short intermission. What we're going to do when we come back, we have audience questions. We'll have questions from the audience members, and then in the final segment of our debate tonight, we'll allow each candidate to question each other in a sort of a free-form format, and that should be enjoyable as our debate continues tonight. What our listeners on 770 KOB, our viewers on Jones Intercable and C-SPAN will be seeing in just a moment are messages from the two candidates who are running for Lieutenant Governor. The incumbent Lieutenant Governor Walter Bradley, the Democratic candidate Diane Dennis. We'll see those, and then we'll be back with more of our debate live from Albuquerque at the Sheraton Uptown Hotel.
This evening's live debate is sponsored in part by Build New Mexico, because your decision matters.
Our live broadcast of this New Mexico governor's debate continues. In a moment, videotape messages from the candidates for lieutenant governor. When the candidates for governor return, they'll be asked questions from the audience. First, here's a look at what's ahead tonight here on C-SPAN 2. Following the conclusion of this debate, a hearing on food safety measures concerning mad cow disease. It was hosted today by the Agriculture Department. That's at 10:30 Eastern. Later, a debate between the candidates for governor of Oregon. At 12:45 a.m., we'll re-air the New Mexico governor's debate you're seeing now. Then just after 2 a.m., John Taylor from the Richard Nixon Library talks about the impeachment process and President Nixon and Clinton. And as our Campaign 98 coverage continues, don't forget you can access C-SPAN's website on the World Wide Web and look at coverage of U.S. Senate and governor's races taking place this fall. Our address is www.cspan.org.
I'm Walter Bradley. As your Lieutenant Governor, I'm proud to chair and serve on many active boards, such as the Workforce Development Board, the Small Business Advocacy Council, the New Mexico Border Authority, and the New Mexico Space Commission, to name a few. My working for you is very exciting and rewarding, and you have recognized me with several honors. In 1997, I received the Albuquerque NAACP Distinguished Leadership Award and was the New Mexico Farm and Livestock Bureau Distinguished Service recipient. This year, I was named the 1998 Progressive Farmer Magazine Man of the Year. I'm most grateful and humbled by this recognition. But tonight, I am speaking with you as the Bradley on the 1998 Johnson-Bradley team. That's what we are, a team like our families that work together for you. Governor Johnson has given me his complete confidence. He has allowed me to be a part of his team in all areas of state government, and as a team, we have successfully worked together solving people problems. We are now providing you with the best public service at the lowest possible cost. Our common sense approach works. The Johnson-Bradley team allowed no new taxes. In fact, we reduced taxes by $106 million, eliminating taxes like the one on prescription drugs. With his veto pen, Governor Johnson put the brakes on government spending, cutting state government budget growth in half. Governor Johnson increased efficiency in state government, saving New Mexicans over $100 million. Governor Johnson has been fighting crime by authorizing new juvenile facilities, 2 new prisons, and 170 new state police officers. We are protecting our valuable water with a new geographical water information system while protecting our environment with strict enforcement of existing laws. With 500 miles of 4-lane road improvements, tax cuts, and streamlined government regulations, Governor Johnson is creating new jobs by making New Mexico more business-friendly. The escalating cost of Medicaid has been halted by moving to managed care. And based on a philosophy, if you can work, you will work, welfare reform is bringing back to thousands of New Mexicans the pride and dignity of having a job. Governor Johnson continues to make education our #1 priority. Today, $300 million additional dollars are spent yearly on education. Over 5,000 college students are receiving free tuition, and a 9% raise in teacher salaries was authorized. As a team, none have done better. I'm very proud to be a part of these accomplishments, and that's why I'm here tonight, asking for your support on November 3rd to continue to improve the quality of life for all New Mexicans. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Diane Denish, the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your busy day to watch this informative debate between the candidates for governor, Martin Chavez and Gary Johnson. As you listen carefully, I'm sure you will understand the very clear choice facing voters on November 3rd. In New Mexico, when you vote for governor, you automatically vote for the lieutenant governor of the same party. Tonight, I want to share with you why I'm running for this office. I believe the Lieutenant Governor's office has great potential, and as the first woman to hold the office, I would seize the opportunity to develop that potential. You and all New Mexicans deserve my full attention to the job and to the issues confronting New Mexico. My roots in a small town, I'm a native of Hobbs, New Mexico, and my experience as a parent and the owner of a small business will guide me to focus on 3 areas. First, the Chavez-Denish administration will establish a division of the Economic Development Department devoted to the needs of small and medium-sized businesses. My role will be to work together with small businesses across New Mexico to help them grow and to provide local jobs. Secondly, as Lieutenant Governor, I will take a hands-on approach to helping Martin Chavez implement his ideas to create safe, accountable schools. I will work with the governor, legislators, educators, parents, and students to create pilot programs that will bring discipline back into schools and that will challenge our kids to stay in school. And thirdly, I will use my experience as a leader in New Mexico First, the state's most respected public policy organization, to listen to New Mexicans, to bring mutual concerns to Martin Chavez, and to develop solutions to difficult problems. Problems such as health care for our families, jobs for our communities, and safe, quality education for every New Mexico child. New Mexicans deserve a hard-working lieutenant governor, one who will fulfill the constitutional duties and run the state Senate well. But the job can and will be more. I ask you to vote on November 3rd for the Chavez-Denish ticket so that on November 4th, New Mexicans will say, yes, we can.
You've seen our work.
And we'll continue with our live broadcast from Albuquerque of the New Mexico governor's debate in just a moment. A bit of programming information for you. We feature our Campaign 98 coverage Sunday evenings on Road to the Capitol. It showcases some of the U.S. Senate and governor's races from around the country. You can see it on our companion network C-SPAN at 6 p.m. Eastern. This weekend, we'll look at the races for governor in Texas and Massachusetts. In North Carolina, we're following a contest for U.S. Senate. Political analyst Stuart Rothenberg talks about that one.
North Carolina Senate race is either this one or New York are the toughest Republican Senate incumbents seeking re-election. The Republican is Locke Faircloth, a one-term conservative hog farmer, and the Democrat is John Edwards, a young, energetic, sort of boyish, he looks like a high school, the captain of his high school basketball team, trial attorney. This is a terrific race. Faircloth, the conservative, who has made a mark by criticizing Washington, D.C. and Marion Barry. Edwards, who portrays himself as a New South, New Democrat. There's an age contrast. Faircloth looks like the old, sort of the stereotype of the more disheveled, rumpled, old Southern Democrat, and indeed he was before he switched to the Republican Party, versus the media-friendly Edwards, who was extremely good-looking, very sincere, and has huge personal wealth. Actually, both candidates have a great deal of wealth. The polls have shown the race close. I think most people would agree that Edwards actually, after winning a competitive primary and spending $3 million of his own money, probably inched ahead of Faircloth, then went off TV, tried to raise money, realized it's not always easy for a millionaire to raise money. Faircloth went on the air and has opened up a bit in the polls. But this is a very close race, different styles, different ideology, different personalities.
A strong American economy. Right now our strength is being tested. Instability overseas has shaken our economy, threatened our savings, put our future at risk. That's why Senator Faircloth's economic experience is more important than ever. Conservative leadership we've relied on to control spending, reduce taxes, and balance the budget for the first time in 40 years. The common sense of a successful businessman. Experience we trust. Senator Locke Faircloth.
2 years ago, my wife Elizabeth and I started a learning center for high school kids. It's open from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 10 o'clock at night. It has computers and volunteer tutors in English and science and math, and Elizabeth works there day after day. And every night we practically have to run kids out of that place. Don't tell me children don't want to learn. We just have to give them a chance.
John Edwards. Spend less on bureaucracy. Put the savings into classrooms and after-school programs. He's endorsed by North Carolina's teachers. John Edwards, the People's Senator.
We now take you back to Albuquerque for the New Mexico governor's debate. The second part is already underway.
And Democratic candidate for governor, former mayor of the city of Albuquerque, Martin Chavez. Now, folks, as you can tell, we have a lively audience here tonight, and we want to request of our, I love this enthusiasm. It's wonderful, and I think it's really good to see here in New Mexico. What we ask our audience to do as we continue this part of the debate is hold your applause to the end and let each candidate have their say during their particular segment. If we don't want to interrupt it too much with applause because we're taking away from their time. So we're going to start now with audience questions, and we asked the audience here at the Sheraton Uptown Hotel to jot down some questions, and we'll pose these questions to both candidates, and we'll start with Democratic candidate Martin Chavez. Gentlemen, the first question from the audience is this: do you intend to lower the state personal income tax as governor? Do you intend to lower the state personal income tax as governor? Martin Chavez.
I would hope that it's possible to do that sometime in the next 4 years. I do think that the $300 million tax cut, personal income tax proposed by my opponent would frankly destroy the services of the state of New Mexico. You'd have to cut schools, lay off police officers to do that. But I do think, and as I said earlier, I applaud the legislature's move to reduce that very portion, top portion of the personal income tax bracket. And let's take a look. But one thing I know is that we've got to put our needs before our wants. And we spend 48th in the nation per student. We're not going to succeed in the next century if we do that. So that's where the money goes first.
Gary Johnson, do you intend to lower the state personal income tax as governor?
Well, I do intend to lower the personal income tax. I think that that will do more toward creating higher paying jobs in the state of New Mexico than anywhere else, than anything else that we could possibly do. And for all those C-SPAN watchers, New Mexico is a great place to come and live. And yet it is kind of scary that the state of New Mexico has an 8.2% income tax at the top rate. We've got to look to lowering that. Now, what I've proposed is reducing the top rate from 8.2% down to 6.7% over a 3-year period, and also lower the bottom bracket, bottom line being that everybody in the state would pay less income tax. I think that, and it totals up to $100 million over 3 years. So we're talking about $33 million a year. That's just a correction that I wanted to make. And by the way, I've made this correction many times. I'll make it again, and I'll make it again, and I'll make it again. But again, it's $100 million over 3 years. I think that it's very prudent. I think it will do more toward creating, again, higher paying jobs than any other single action. And we've got to take a balanced approach to looking at all of state government. We've got to improve education. We've got to create higher paying jobs, and I believe that that is by lowering income taxes. We need to make our streets safe for our citizens, and then we need to make government as efficient as we possibly can, because a dollar saved anywhere is a dollar that can be spent on education, a dollar that can be spent on highways, a dollar that can go back into your and my pockets as taxes that we won't have to pay.
Our next question from the audience, and we'll start with Governor Johnson and his response on this one. Why is New Mexico last in so many areas? Why is New Mexico last in so many areas? Gary Johnson.
Well, again, let's take our starting point, and our starting point is that we're last in virtually every area that's measurable. So what I've focused on since I've been governor, and will continue to focus on, is quality of life, improving the quality of life in the state of New Mexico. And it's my opinion that the quality of life is made up of 4 components: education, delivering the best education that you possibly can; economic development, creating higher paying jobs; making the streets safe when it comes to crime; providing the most efficient government that you possibly can. I think that there are measurable components in each one of those 4 areas, and that if you improve on those measurable components, that you improve on the quality of life in the state of New Mexico. This didn't happen overnight, and I believe that we are moving in the right direction. I believe that from the bottom of my heart, that we are moving in the right direction in every single area. I just finished my 5th ride across New Mexico picking up trash. We did 700 miles over 6 days. We biked a lot. We picked up a lot of trash. We made this much of a dent in the trash. Relative to the problem, though, it was somewhere on the moon. My point is that every single area of state government that we should be making a positive difference in, we've made a positive difference. Has it gone far enough? You might argue that. But without question, we've improved across the board.
Same question to Martin Chavez. Why is New Mexico last in so many areas?
Well, last place was not, will be my starting point in January. It was not my opponent's starting place. We were not the state with the highest rate of unemployment in the United States 4 years ago. We were not ranked the worst state in the United States of America in which to raise a child 4 years ago. We were not the poorest state in the United States of America 4 years ago. We do not have the largest gap between rich and poor of any state in the United States of America 4 years ago. This is where we have come under the policies of the current administration. So how are we going to dig ourselves out? First off, we need a governor that will work with people. I will reach across party lines to work with all New Mexicans. And that legislature that isn't very popular in New Mexico today, well, you know what? Regardless of their party, I'm going to work with them, and I'm going to work with the judicial branch, because that's how you start moving a state forward. We will have full-day kindergarten because we know every study shows us that if you don't invest in those children young, you will do what we've had to do the last 4 years, and that's build prisons. And we are better than that. So, full-day kindergarten, smaller class size, re-emphasis on reading, and then we've got to talk about responsibility in New Mexico once again. The responsibility of parents to engage in their children's education. You can't expect a governor and 112 legislators to do it for you. We have to do that ourselves, and that responsibility has come right back to the family. We've got to get serious about crime, and that's why you can't veto bills that would require violent criminals to serve at least 85% of their time in jail. I will sign that bill. When you commit a crime in New Mexico, there's none of this 50% time served. It'll be at least 85% time in a Chavez administration. But it's how you make government work, and it's not stepping back for waiting things to come to you. It's being aggressive. It's being action-oriented. It's going out and making things happen. It's about getting things done. I did that as mayor. I know how to get things done. We'll do that as governor.
Our next question from the audience has to do with Indian gaming in New Mexico. We're going to ask our candidates, what is your position on Indian gaming in New Mexico, and would you sign the current Indian gaming compacts? And we'll start with Martin Chavez.
Well, unfortunately, boy, and I hate to say this on national television, but we are the only state in the United States of America that has full casino gambling, completely unregulated. And it is a travesty. I think, frankly, we have made a mistake in going down the path toward gambling, particularly unregulated throughout the state of New Mexico. By the governor's own account, it's draining over $400 million, approximately $400 million from our state economy annually. It was done without any analysis going in. I guess it was one of those promises made and promises kept. Certainly was not required by federal law, and now we see this phenomenon in New Mexico of hundreds of thousands of casino dollars, gambling money in elections. I've said no to that money. My opponent has readily accepted it. I'm not sure, given where we are with gambling, that the next governor can do anything about it if they obey the compacts. Now, I know my opponent has said they shouldn't have to pay what they're required to pay under the law. I will enforce the law as governor, and I will resist any expansion of gambling in the state of New Mexico, whether it be on reservation, off reservation. It is simply not my vision for the future of New Mexico. When you take the poorest state in the union and you impose gambling, it is simply a poor man's tax in the poorest state in America.
Let me repeat the question, and this goes to Gary Johnson. What is your position on Indian gaming in New Mexico, and would you sign the current Indian compacts?
Well, it is a promise made, promise kept. When I was running for governor 4 years ago, this was clearly something that I said from the very beginning that I was going to do, that I was going to negotiate compacts with the Indians, that 4 years ago we had 11 years of Indian gambling, unregulated, not sharing in the revenue from Indian gambling. I said I was going to sign compacts, that it would be regulated, that we would share in the revenue from Indian gambling. I disagree in that we have set up a regulatory body now to oversee Indian gambling. It is in effect. You're going to see regulation of Indian gambling. The revenue sharing portion of this, I think, is still an area of contention, and I think it's important to go back to day one. There's federal legislation that has passed in this country, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. all states have to comply with the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. And in my opinion, that's simply what we've done in the state of New Mexico, is comply with that act. There are now 160 compacts that have been signed nationwide. Indian gambling is a nationwide phenomenon. The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act does not allow for revenue sharing. So the legislature passed revenue sharing that spelled out 16%. I think that if the state of New Mexico, that if the legislature does not negotiate that down, bring that figure down to a 4 or 5% level, I'm afraid that this is going to play itself out through the courts and that the state of New Mexico is going to be left with no revenue sharing. So again, going forward, and there's a plus side to this. The plus side of this is that Indians, for the first time, have a source of revenue that benefits Indian tribes and pueblos. It's something that we haven't seen before. There is a plus side to this, giving Indians their own purse for their own economic development, for their own programs.
Gentlemen, our next question from the audience is this, and we will go to Gary Johnson for the first response. Question is this: I'm a student at the University of New Mexico. What are you doing to ensure that there will be good-paying jobs available and I won't have to leave the state?
Well, this gets back to taxation. Those states in this country that have reduced taxes, and when we talk about reducing taxes, we're talking about growing the economic pie. In New Mexico, we have a small economic pie. The state of New Mexico is taking a large chunk of that pie. We need to enlarge the economic pie, take a smaller slice of that pie. And so when it comes to higher paying jobs in the state of New Mexico, bottom line, it's income taxes. It's reducing the income tax from our present 8.2% top rate. I think that long term we should target a 3.5% rate, but as I pointed out earlier, have a 3-year plan to reduce that from 8.2% down to 6.7%. $100 million over 3 years. I think that it's very prudent. I think it will go a long way toward attracting higher paid jobs to the state of New Mexico. New Mexico is competing with Texas. They have no income tax. Competing with Oklahoma, Colorado, Utah at about 5.5%, and I believe Arizona's is being statutorily eliminated. This is what we're competing against. We have the highest income tax in the region. There's a reason that a $100,000 job doesn't come to New Mexico. They have to pay $8,200 in income tax. That job is going to Texas, where they're not paying any income tax on that, where they're able to buy a new vehicle, where they're able to afford more of a house payment, where they're able to pay more to send their kids to school. Again, this is the single biggest impediment to higher paying jobs in the state of New Mexico.
I'll repeat the question for you. I'm a student at UNM. What are you doing to ensure that there will be good paying jobs available and I won't have to leave the state? Martin Chavez.
Well, I keep hearing this talk of 100 million, but the incumbent governor, my opponent, 4 weeks ago said it was a $300 million tax cut. Actually, where I got it, Governor, was off your website. Now, if you've changed your position from 300 to 100, I can address that. But that's what exactly was on your website, and it's exactly what you told the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce when we first debated in this campaign. High taxes are not the greatest impediment in New Mexico, the personal income tax. Indeed, when Craig Barrett, who's the CAO of Intel, was asked about future expansion in New Mexico, he did not say, your personal income tax is too high. He said, let's talk about the regulatory framework in New Mexico, then we'll talk expansion. Intel's had pending for 4 years a water or an air permit application before they finally got a public hearing, and still no decision. When the governor commissioned a study as to why companies don't locate in New Mexico, taxes were number 6. Number 1 was labor availability. That's workforce development. Close to markets, low operating costs, quality of life, incentives provided by the city and state, all ranked higher in the opinion of business people than taxes. I think if we want to have long-term, meaningful economic prosperity in New Mexico so the children don't have to leave the state to realize their dreams, we need schools as good as our children. and we've got to address crime. And that's something government has to do. You can't say, have everybody walking around with submachine guns to protect themselves. You got to have good, sound law enforcement. You don't veto district attorneys' budgets. You work with people so that you have meaningful law enforcement. These things can all be done. Yes, we can.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to give the candidates a chance to question one another in a face-to-face question-off, if you will. And what we're going to do, and we've drawn backstage once again as to who will go first, and Governor Johnson will get to ask the first question by drawing. One candidate will ask the other a question. The candidate being asked will have 2 minutes to respond, and back and forth we go. So let's get started. We'll start with Gary Johnson.
Well, Martin Chavez, I've been with you on numerous occasions, and my impression is that you're telling people what they want to hear. You're making a lot of promises, and for the record, I'd like to know if you're going to work to dismantle the four following things. Indian gambling. Are you looking to dismantle Indian gambling? Are you looking to dismantle the privatized prisons that we've established? Are you looking to dismantle the building of Highway 44? And are you looking to dismantle managed care for Medicaid? Exactly for the record, what are your positions on in these four areas, for the record?
Certainly, I'm happy to answer the question. First off, telling people what they want to hear, I think all New Mexicans know that we need to improve our schools. And they also know that you need smaller class sizes and you need to reach out to children early if you're going to solve those problems. Small class size, full-day kindergarten, those will help us accomplish those things. So whether that's what folks want to hear, I know it's not what the incumbent wants to hear, but that's what we've got to do. Indian gambling, I'm not sure there's anything I can do about it. This mess is made. The toothpaste is out of the tube. But I'll tell you this, I will enforce the compacts. They're in violation, many of them, right now, refuse to pay that amount. They've been encouraged by my opponent not to pay. And if in that process we can shut it down, we'll shut it down. I don't believe in gambling in New Mexico. But as long as they're in compliance, I think we have to be candid. This is a problem visited upon us by my opponent, and we're going to be stuck with it for the next decade in New Mexico. I don't believe in privatized prisons. They've had them down there in Hobbs under lockdown now for I don't know how many weeks, terrified that there's going to be another incident, another stabbing, another beating during this election year. We're importing murderers from the District of Columbia to Estancia. I feel for those communities out there that have to live next door to murderers from other places in the country. So yes, I will try to put the brakes on private prisons. They're not saving us one dime. They're jeopardizing New Mexico's safety. And frankly, there's absolutely no accountability in those systems. Highway 44, we are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in interest on a boondoggle. That road needs to be built. It needs to be built. But 100% financing so that all local contractors are excluded and you only get the big guys that give the big bucks to participate, that's the wrong way to do it. Managed care, I think, is a necessary evil at this time, but the way it's been administered currently, it is a failure for patients, it is a failure for providers.
Okay, that's time. And now, of course, we'll turn it around and let Martin Chavez ask Gary Johnson the next question.
Mr. Johnson, to date you've received thousands and thousands of dollars in tobacco industry political contributions from Philip Morris, the world's largest manufacturer of cigarettes. Issues relating to tobacco often come before our state government, as they did earlier this year when you vetoed a modest tax increase on cigarettes that would have funded cancer research, children's health programs. Republican State Senator Billy McKibben, the sponsor of the law, said after veto that your reelection bumper sticker should be placed on the hearses used for people who die of tobacco-related illnesses. Will you tonight pledge to return that money to Philip Morris so that all New Mexicans will know that public policy is dictated by what is in the best interest of all New Mexicans and not just the tobacco industry?
Well, going back to the start of my campaign for governor, and we're talking about 5 years ago, Johnson hasn't been for sale and is not for sale today. Nothing gets purchased in Johnson. I know it's hard for y'all to take that there could actually be somebody in the governor's chair that is beholden to no one. What I have done since I've been governor, of course, is I paid for my own campaign. I jump-started my own campaign. I promised that I was going to bring a common sense business attitude to state government, and that's exactly what I've done. So contributions have not been based on any quid pro quo. Nobody gets anything for giving me a contribution. And when it comes to taxes in the state of New Mexico, we have plenty of taxes in the state of New Mexico. As I said earlier, when I took office, we were the second highest tax state in the United States as a percentage of income. Today, we're the 8th highest tax state as a percentage of income. There is no room to raise taxes in the state of New Mexico. And talking about those initiatives for cancer research, we've got the money. The money is there. We're still taxed enough to be able to afford those kinds of initiatives if that's what the legislature decides to spend their money on. So that money can still be spent in those areas, but it's important that we don't raise taxes in the state of New Mexico.
Now, Gary Johnson, another question for Martin Chavez.
Well, all-day kindergarten, limiting classroom size, kind of asking Barry's question, limiting classroom size to 15 in the first and second grade, repeal of the gross receipts tax on food, increases for all the rest of state government, all the incentive, all of what you've been talking about. We're talking about billions of dollars. From my standpoint, promising everything to everybody. In my opinion, one of two things happen. You don't deliver on your promises, or we're going to have the largest tax increase that the state has ever seen. How are you going to make this happen? How are you going to balance the checkbook?
Actually, and thank you for the question, Governor, most of what I promised to do as governor won't cost us anything. 120,000 children currently not with health insurance, that's already funded. We'll go out and get them. It doesn't cost anything. The money is already there, as you have readily conceded. Taking politics out of the state engineer's office that's there for the first time in 50 years, that's easy. You fire the state engineer, you reach across party lines, and you develop consensus on who ought to replace that position. Hiring cabinet secretaries that don't have to leave every year because of impropriety, that's a function of proper screening and asking the right questions of those people. Funding the Division of Science and Technology and the Office of Economic Development that's been allowed to become empty in the last 4 years, that money hasn't come back to New Mexicans. It was only shifted, so you move it right back. Reformation of testing in the schools and accountability, that doesn't cost any additional money. It's management. It's a change in philosophy, a change in direction for the state of New Mexico. But what does cost money? You know what, Governor? Full-day kindergarten is more expensive than no kindergarten. It will cost us roughly $40 million a year. $40 million a year when just this past year the legislature put $120 million of new money into education. It could have been done last year had there been the proper leadership in the governor's office. Smaller class size, again, about the same price tag, but I phase it in over 4 years at $10 million a year. And again, uncollected taxes are up to $432 million, 75% higher than they were just 4 years ago. So I don't envision the need for any tax increase. When I ran for mayor, I said no tax increases unless voted upon by the public. I kept my pledge. I intend to do no less as governor of New Mexico. But the one thing I know is we have got to get serious about these schools. And anyone that tells folks there's a free lunch or you can get something for nothing, now that's telling folks what they want to hear and not what they need to hear.
The questioning continues. Now Martin Chavez with a question for Gary Johnson.
Governor, earlier this year under your direction, the state signed contracts with private prison companies that gave them complete freedom to import murderers, rapists, child molesters, the super predators from all across the country and house them here in New Mexico, such as those from the District of Columbia that are currently being housed in Estancia. In contrast to your policy, which you called a savings option, end quote, other states have built in these common sense safeguards into their contracts. My question this evening is, will you change your position tonight and support a law that will prohibit the importation of out-of-state murderers to New Mexico's private prisons, even if it cuts into their profit margin?
Well, let me give you a little education on all this, and I'll just assume that you were just misinformed. Estancia is a county prison, so the state of New Mexico has no say with regard to what kind of prisoners are accepted at Estancia. When it comes to Hobbs and Santa Rosa, what we have agreed to with the private prisons is we have the first right to fill those beds with criminals in New Mexico. Now, I think it's very important to point out that we have such a terrific crime problem in the state of New Mexico because we don't have space for the criminals that have been convicted of crimes against you and I. So we are more than going to be able to fill up these beds with New Mexico criminals. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And long term, I believe that adding punishment as a deterrent to crime in New Mexico will go a long way toward reducing crime. And this is very, very significant. These new privately run prisons, privately designed, built, operated, and financed, these two new prisons are costing the state of New Mexico $30 a day less per prisoner per day than what it costs the state of New Mexico to run these prisons. This is very, very significant. That is $30 a day that forever can go into education, that can go into highways, that can go back into your and my pockets as taxes that we don't have to pay. So again, privatized prisons is a great example of doing a better job, taking the dividends from doing that better job and having money to spend on real areas of priority.
Each of the candidates will be able to ask each other 4 questions. We're to our 3rd question now, and Gary Johnson gets that one for Martin Chevis.
Well, all-day kindergarten, limiting classroom size to 15 in the 1st and 2nd grade, repeal of the gross receipts tax on food, increase for all of the rest of state government. All the things that you're talking about doing. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. Promising everything to everyone. Either one of 2 things is going to happen. You're not going to deliver on your promises, or we're going to have the largest tax increase that we've ever seen in the state of New Mexico. If this sounds like I'm repeating the question, I am. I would like to have an answer. How do you balance this checkbook? How in good conscience can you talk about wanting to sign every single bill that I have vetoed and talk about all these incentives, a program for everything, an answer for everything lies in just spending more money? How are you going to balance this checkbook? Tell me, please, are we going to have the largest tax increase that the state has ever seen, or are you not going to deliver on all of these promises?
Well, let me try to explain once again from my opponent. First off, let's talk about the vetoes, not one of which was necessary to balance a budget. Budgets are required to be balanced by the state constitution. They were balanced when they came up to the executive. A child who's been sexually molested, a nurse to investigate and to counsel, that was vetoed. A child with cancer so that they could out and have an experience in life while they were still alive, $50,000. That was vetoed, and it goes on and on and on. And it breaks my heart that for no reason, not to balance a budget, but just for a philosophical imperative, these children were vetoed. I won't do that, Governor. I can't in good conscience do it. So let's talk again. We bring stability to government. You stop the revolving door 3 secretaries of economic development, 4 secretaries of corrections, 3 secretaries of health in 4 years. You bring stability. What does cost? Smaller class size costs, full-day kindergarten costs. $40 million for each, $60 million one-time cost for the capital construction on the kindergarten. That money's sitting up there right now in the general fund. It's there right now. I think the more important question is, Mr. Johnson, why are you against our children having full-day kindergarten? How come you will oppose that, but you won't impose a tax cut for the wealthiest New Mexicans of roughly $300 million or $100 million, depending on which position you're taking this evening?
And now Martin Chavez with a third question for Gary Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, during the past 4 years, your cabinet has been a virtual revolving door, featuring an unprecedented turnover among your top aides. We've had 4 corrections secretaries, 3 secretaries of human services, 3 secretaries of economic development, 2 secretaries of children, youth, and families, and now we're on our 2nd director of the state lottery. And that gaming control board that's supposed to be regulating gambling in New Mexico doesn't even have the chair. I think he got arrested last week or cited for some sort of problem. How can we expect people to do business within the state when they have that type of revolving door in a cabinet among high-level officials, many of whom left under a cloud of ethical suspicion?
Well, I disagree completely. In fact, I absolutely disagree. I think that there is stability in the cabinet, that there has been, and these statistics, you know, you talk about, how many corrections secretaries did you say?
4.
4. There have been 2. There have been 2. How many economic development secretaries did you say there have been?
3.
2. Come on, man. You know, you need to be getting your facts straight. I think you got this one right. How many secretaries did you say in children, youth, and families?
Mr. Johnson, you fired your first corrections secretary because he disagreed with you. He called your savings for private prisons mythical. Then, I believe, Donna, she couldn't get confirmed by the state Senate. And then you had one even before the first one, and now we're on the 4th one, Rob Perry. That's 4.
I actually think we're on number 2.
That's actually
how many
secretaries of economic development?
2. Gary Bratcher.
No,
and
the first
John
one. The first one left the state.
First one left the state. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Gary Bratcher was the first cabinet secretary of economic development.
No, left the state. Your last one resigned week before last. Had a problem with paying child support and some other problems that apparently you didn't ask about when you hired him. It's all factual, Governor. And actually, you know what? Well, you know what? Let's say we disagree. How's that? And we'll let the public decide.
Great. I love that. I do want to say that we've had a lot of stability throughout all of state government. That the people that are with me have hung with me. And children, youth, and families. Heather Wilson got elected to Congress. She was Secretary of Children, Youth, and Families. So, without exception, I hire people based on the best people that I can possibly hire for the job. And I expect the best job possible from everybody that I hire. And I have a philosophy that you reward the best, you get rid of the worst. And to say that I haven't made mistakes when it comes to hiring a few people, I won't lie about that either. But I will tell you that we've done a great job. We have tremendous stability in state government. And it has, the result has shown up in the results that talked about this evening.
And we're at time, Governor, thank you. Because of time constraints, we're going to go right to closing remarks. And I'm going to ask our 2 candidates for a bit of compromise here, since we've talked about compromise tonight, to limit your remarks to about 1.5 minutes, if you would, please, and that would help us in our broadcast tonight. We drew backstage for who would go first and last for the closing remarks, and our 2 candidates. Going first tonight will be Gary Johnson.
Well, what needs to happen over the next 4 years? Talked about putting $300 million a year more into education. We need to make educational accountable in the state of New Mexico. I believe we need to abolish the state school board. We need to make the state school superintendent a cabinet secretary. Make the governor accountable for what's happening in education. Test every student, every school, every year. Expand charter schools in the state of New Mexico. And long-term, implement vouchers, allowing parents and children the ability to choose which public or private school they want to attend. I think that we need to lower income tax in the state of New Mexico. Long-term, we need to target 3.5%. I think that we need to repeal Little Davis-Bacon in the state of New Mexico. Let's build 6 schools rather than 5 schools. Let's resurface 6 miles of highway rather than 5 miles of highway. Let's make New Mexico a right-to-work state. Let's reduce uninsured motorists in the state of New Mexico by limiting liabilities and lowering caps. Elimination of good time in the state of New Mexico, which allows a convicted criminal to only serve half the time they've been sentenced for in jail. Continue to make welfare and Medicaid reform work. Privatization, continue to privatize where possible, because the dividends in privatization allow money to be spent on other areas of priority. And again, I just come back in closing. There's nothing that I vetoed that my opponent wouldn't have signed. And when it comes to the checkbook, it's my belief that it just doesn't add up. That all of these initiatives that you're talking about just don't match the amount of revenue that comes into this thing.
That's time. And now closing remarks from Martin Chavez.
Again, I want to say thank you for being with us this evening. And I don't have that fancy checkbook with the millions of dollars in it to wave around. But I know that it is cheaper to inoculate a child against illness than to hospitalize a child. And I know that it's cheaper to educate a child than to imprison an adult. And that's one of the things we're just not doing in New Mexico. In 4 years, my opponent has proposed and passed one solitary bill regarding education. It only came on his radar screen when he started talking about reelection. He's publicly apologized for spending so much money on public schools, and his administration has cursed those who educate our children. He said that an 11-year-old who doesn't want to go to school shouldn't have to go to school. In a Chavez administration, there's only one place for an 11-year-old, and that's in school. If we don't get serious about our schools, we will be confronted with a teacher shortage over the next 5 to 7 years that will be breathtaking in its enormity. This past month, we had the horrible situation there at Roswell High School of a teacher being threatened by a student. Nothing was done to that student. He should have been thrown out of school. And that's what would happen in a Chavez administration. I'll pass legislation to put teachers back in charge of discipline in the classroom. The passion of my administration will be education. And for those who say we don't have the time or money to save our children, I say, yes, we can. God bless each and every one of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to acknowledge our panelists tonight, David Buckholtz, Arlene Roth, Barry Massey, and Sandy Eastham. Thank you much for lending your expertise here tonight. Our host, the Sheraton Uptown Hotel here in Albuquerque, News Radio 770 KOB, Jones Intercable, as well as our fine community and state-minded sponsors, and the candidates Gary Johnson and Martin Chavez. We thank you both. This program has been recorded and will air again on Jones Intercable on Wednesday, October 14th and Friday, October 30th on Jones Intercable Channel 63 at 7 p.m. We thank you all for coming and watching tonight, and good night, everyone.
Campaign 98 coverage is featured Sunday evenings on C-SPAN's Road to the Capitol.